Welcome back to the Inside Football podcast. We recorded and sat down the NFFL Finals review podcast, me, Nick and Kiwi, and in post we felt that it went just a little bit too long to release as one episode. So I'm here just to give you a heads up that we've split it into two episodes. We'll release it at the same time. So first up, you'll hear our thoughts on the Saturday, which is the NFFL Premiership final day, which I had the good fortune of commentating on the third and fourth place in the finals. And then in the second episode, which you can catch at the same time, there will be our thoughts on Division 1 on the Sunday as well. So without further ado, let's get into it. Welcome to the Inside Ripple podcast. My name's Andy Taylor, and I'm joined, as always, to talk all things flag football by Nick and Kiwi. Great to have you after what has been a little bit of downtime following some busy couple of weeks for finals. Obviously, we've broken down what happened over the Brit Bowl weekend in relation to contact. And then the following weekend, we had the NFFL Finals at Platts Lane in Manchester. So we're all slightly more refreshed, aren't we, coming into this, and to give our views on what happened over those very busy couple of days. Nick, have you recovered? Because we've spoken to Kiwi since, but have you recovered from that?
I'm feeling okay. My stress ball has been destroyed, but generally speaking, I'm okay. I'm no longer angry, so I've found myself the inner calm to accept realities of the world. So yeah, I'm in a good place. Let's talk, and hopefully by the end of this podcast, we'll have more friends than enemies.
Awesome. The question is, have you dried out yet? Because in traditional last 2 years, at least, Platt Lane tradition, Saturday was stunning. Sunday, torrential, horrendous.
But this September, so many things happened this past month. The combination of everything was in the rain. So we have literally one of the best summers we have had for years. Yeah, golden game days that were fantastic. And then we get to finals and it's just rain. But rain. And it's just, what a way to end it. And it's thrown up some fantastic results. It's thrown up some great games. It's an extra bit of salt that's gone into the mix. It's been a great September. It's going to be a lot of fun unpacking that with you guys tonight. Looking forward to seeing different perspectives on some of the results and how they turned out. And I think there's a lot of stuff in there. I personally never dry out. I live in Scotland, so and in the part of Scotland I live in too, webbed feet are quite common. So I guess it's kind of helpful because one day we'll all be when the oceans rise and the ice. But let's move into the podcast.
Let's move away from webbed feet quickly because as you say, we've got plenty to break down. We've got 2 days, a whole 2 days to break down. Straight into it. Prem Saturday. I like chronological order. Let's start there because I always remember what Bez, friends from the Way We Hitch and See It, told me last year for my first finals day, which was Saturday's really serious. It's the Prem guys that turn up. They want to take it seriously. They want to come away and win it all. You've then got the youth who take it as seriously as you guys know. And then there's a bit more of a festival feel on the Sunday when Div 1 come along, where it's just like controlled chaos, isn't it? And to start off with, we obviously had the wild card round in the NFFL, and some very interesting results that came out of it. Certainly from our standpoint, Kiwi, we had obviously an amazing view of pitch 1, and then we had obviously 3 more pitches going on. But in the wild card round, was there anything that you picked up on early on before we start getting into the results in particular that stood out to you as we started off the day?
Me?
Yeah, it's got to be you.
No.
That's got to be you. You're
I think for me, arguably, in the wildcard round, we probably didn't see any of the upsets that sometimes you might. If you're going to get a big upset in flag, generally it comes out of the wildcards, right? Because you've got your top-seeded teams going in at the quarterfinal level. Generally, you've got the wild cards is where people have battled it out. We knew going into this how close it was to get into those wild card spots, right? People missed out that probably shouldn't have. We had some great teams there. The closest game really was that Cheltenham Grangemouth.
What a game.
Right. What a game. Like, if you're going to talk about anything in the wildcard round, that's where you're going, right? And it was just, it had everything, that game. And I don't know, we'll talk about other games later on that maybe probably had a lot more than anybody anticipated, overtimes and playoffs and all kinds of stuff. But yeah, I think that's where you kind of go, you see those kind of scores and you're like, 39-38 final score, and you're like, that's where those extra points count. That's where, you see teams going from 1 point ending up in the plate instead of going to quarterfinals. Like, that's devastating, but also amazingly exciting to watch.
100%. Yeah, sorry, Nick, I was just going to add on to that game that we actually got front row seats for, and there was it was back and forth the whole time. And at one point it was almost like, so they were 8 and 9, weren't they, these seeds? So it was always going to be the closest game. But during it, you really thought that at the very beginning of it all, that Cheltenham were going to run away with it. They were on fire on offence. And Broncos were really tripping over themselves to start off with. And then they started clawing it back. And you felt the frustration, because obviously they've got some GB guys in that Broncos team. And even the GB guys, you could see that they were like, this is really frustrating. We're tripping over our own feet here. Silly fouls, defence giving up a couple of long passes, which they wouldn't have been happy with. But I was scrambling for a minute there to try and get a name, and I can't really see it. But they're number 46. I think he might have been on the day 46. Their wide receiver, for Cheltenham Neptunes, he was unbelievable all day, and you couldn't call it in that game until the very last play of the game, and Broncos managed to, I think they shut it out in the end to finish that, and it was just a perfect start to the day in that bracket. And unfortunately for Cheltenham Neptunes, they went on to the plate, and the Broncos went on to the quarterfinals to face the London Spoke in the end. But it was just the nicest start to the day to see such an incredible game happening on pitch one, where everybody walks past and everyone gets to see it. So yeah, over to you, Nick. What did you pick up on from this?
Same echo. What a fantastic way to start the game. But you also have to remember, that's a long day when you go into a 39-38 battle. You've got a lot of football to play, and I think that maybe washed up in the next result when the Broncos obviously went up against the Smoke, and Smoke are a great team. But you're not coming out of a game like that early on, without it having some effect, without it having some detrimental effect. Nevertheless, we take a look and just to jump ahead a little bit to the plates final. You got two teams in there, the wildcard, that both won. Between the two of them, you're looking at a total of 79 points that they put up between those two teams, that then eventually end up, along the way falling foul. I think the great thing that came out of that game was just, it's a good advert for football. What a way to start the game. Nobody's slouchy, nothing started, and it just sets a tempo. It just sets a tempo that it's going to be that kind of a day. And I think you see some great results here in the slate as it goes through the day. Obviously, I don't want to jump too far ahead in what we're talking about, but we ended up with the top four, the big four, in slugging it out at the end. I'm sure we'll come into that in a minute. With full credit to Grangemouth. Holding your nerve in a game like that is in itself a skill. And, for the Neptune, my goodness, you put up 38 points and you lose, that's got to be heartbreaking. Yeah. How much you put into that game. So I think it was only fair that they should have had a good run, as they did during the plate. Unfortunately, falling short just at the end, which we can see there. But wow, that's a battle. That's gonna be a great game. I wasn't there; you guys were there. Although I was following it in our chat, it looked like I really regretted not being down there that morning. But there we go.
They're really not far off Cheltenham, really aren't, because I think if I remember correctly, they were close last year and similar happened. I think they might have even been plate winners in the end last year, were they? I could be wrong on that, but was it somebody else?
Maybe.
Plate
no,
was
I'm not sure.
Plate Div
Actually, it
1
could have
was your badges, wasn't it? But in the I could be wrong, but they're close. They've got some incredibly skilled guys, and I think I've got the name. I think it's Kelvin Asawe, the wide receiver that I was talking about, who for the Cheltenham Neptunes, and he was mightily impressive. I was hearing about him. Apparently, he's an ex-basketball player. So, if you imagine the leap that he had, the speed that he had, the agility he had, hopefully, I'm building a picture on what an elite athlete he is going to be. Absolutely, when he gets a few more years of a flag underneath his belt. Outlaws losing to Sharks probably wasn't a surprise to me on the day, because Sharks was so good. Remember the conversation that we had, Nick, with Jason Masters around the two quarterbacks? They had that. They had some very skillful two quarterbacks that they were able to double up on. And I think they surprised the Outlaws in the end in the wildcard round. And they went on 33-15 victors in the wildcard round there to go on to face, quickly check, the Glasgow Hornets, just the defending champs, on the day in the next round. For those who are listening, Crows faced the London Fire 26-19 to the Crows, went on to face the Cardiff Hurricanes, and Reading Devils took it to the Oil Cats, who seemed probably a couple of men down on the day, and they finished 40-13, and Reading Devils went on to the Titans in the quarterfinals. So, like I say, probably a mixed bag in the end if you were going to do predictions based on seeds, but certainly no shocks, it felt like, in the wildcard round, to your point, Kiwi. Before we go into the quarterfinals, do you want to have a little look at the plate? Sorry, mate.
The plate quarterfinals?
Yeah, go ahead. Let's talk about the plate before we go on to the national finals sort of bracket, shall we?
Okay, fair enough. Okay. I think overall, generally in the plate, again, you probably saw, if we look down the slate and then look into where we ended up with the four teams and then the finalists, I think, the fact that we had Cheltenham Neptunes versus Reading Devils in the final. And I think, something I want to mention when we go back to the quarterfinals, where we ended up with Reading Devils coming into the plate, I think is a key result for what ultimately happened over the course of the day, really. But I think, I felt that maybe Manchester Crows probably, that went into overtime, that Cheltenham-Manchester Crows game. I thought if anyone was going to beat Cheltenham, it would have, I'm sure Manchester were probably a little bit disappointed in that result. But again, that went into an overtime, possession game, right? So that game finished up 40-all, I assume. And then we obviously had Cheltenham come out and win that in overtime. So again, I think if Manchester had won that game, you arguably probably would have seen Manchester in the final as well. It's just the way the draw kind of panned out. I think, Manchester Crows probably would have expected to do slightly better. And when we go back to the quarterfinals in the Premiership, you look at who they played in that quarterfinal, being the Cardiff Hurricanes. Arguably, if they'd played many of the other teams, you might have seen Manchester come out on top and progress a little bit further in the finals themselves. So, yeah, I think overall, though, I would say that's probably, there wasn't any shocks. I don't know, Nick, would you agree? I think once we saw those teams who ended up in plate, then we saw who the finalists were, apart from, for me, the Crows were a question mark and probably could have done well had they not faced Cheltenham straight off the bat, maybe.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Cheltenham, they showed in the wild card that they were there for business. Yeah, sure, they lost by that narrows the margins to the Broncos in that 38-39 game. But unsurprised to see them get to the plate final, to be honest with you. Like I said at the beginning, you don't lose when you score 38 points and by any means look like a soft team. That was a good team, and that was a good team that was beating a tight game. So they deserved that run to get all the way to the final, I think. That probably took away some of the vinegar from the loss at the start of the day. Equally, too, you got Reading Devils there turning over Aberdeen at the start of the day, 40-13, only to fall by 1 point also in the next game to the Titans. So it's that kind of like, do you know what? We're coming home with something. Because you don't go in those kind of fights where you're slugging out until the last round and then think to yourself, right, let's just roll over for the rest of the day. No, they had a bit between their teeth. So I think the right two teams got through to the plates final. I think the scores probably was right. If I take a look at the Devils' score against the Titans, when we talk about the actual quarter final for the main competition, the trophy itself, Titans were great. They were great that day. I mean, they gave the Hornets, when I think about it, they gave everyone something they hadn't seen from them. Nobody expected that result. The Hornets probably were a little bit aghast, and there's maybe a couple of squeaky moments in that game where they thought to themselves, hang on, we're getting a real game off this team. So let's not use that in any way to diminish the Reading Devils. The Reading Devils deserve to get through the plate. They deserve to play final. They deserve to go home with something. Because coming that close to such a high seed as the Titans, people who were then going to push on to give the Hornets probably arguably the toughest game. And that's no disrespect to London. But that was a game that there was a real kind of, that was a David and Goliath, and we just walked up and just punched them in the face. It's one of those kind of games. I think the Devils deserve to be in the final. They deserve to win the plate, and Cheltenham certainly deserved something after that fantastic first game that they lost it by. They deserved that one. So I think the plate was just and was fair. A little bit of heartbreak along the way for various people who are in the mix there. Obviously, we're talking about the Crows. Great team. I mean, come on, the Crows are a great team. You can't have a conversation nowadays when you say the Titans without bringing the Crows in the same conversation. There's a real battle in Manchester. That is a two-team city. And they both turned each other this season, I think, in the regular season. So, excellent teams. Taking nothing away from them, I think we got the right result. And I think the right team won the plate at the end of the day. Now, I know there was some contention around some calls in the day. I know there was a lot of problems with lightning stopping play. I know there was probably a few problems too inside of that moment where I believe that Paul and the others were trying to get people in off the pitch. About 50% of the people didn't actually just come off the pitch, which is a bit of a shame in terms of executing your lightning protocol. No pun intended. But, there must have been stress, frustration, that delay in the game. Having no food as well, man. If you turn up there and you forgot your packed lunch when you're in that wildcard game and there's no food, you're going to be real hungry. There's only so much coffee you can drink. Thankfully, EP Sports were there to make sure that people could spend all of that cash on something else. It's very good of them. But I think the day as we saw it pan out, we ended up with the right teams. I mean, let's come back to the main competition. We ended up with the right teams. You had your top four there. What did you want to see? You wanted to see that kind of thing pan out like that. But there are teams along the way that fall into those casualties who deserve to become better in their eyes, I'm sure. Grangemouth coming out of that must have thought, wow, 39-38, on to the next, and then you basically walk into the next game and it's like, London Smoke, goodbye,
Smoke, yeah.
What we had next time, and then you bounce the plate, we've got London Fire. Okay, right, okay, this thing. Well, yeah, London Fire it was, wasn't it? And then you think to yourself, okay, right, that's quite enough. For one day, but I think the Prem day I didn't follow. I wasn't down there. You guys were there on the scene. I was following in the chat with you, watching the fantastic service that you're putting on. Andy was obviously there with Youngie, and I thought the commentary was excellent. I was able to follow what was going on. I got a sense of it, and it seemed like the lightning was not, metaphorically speaking, just in the skies. There was a lot of it on the ground too. Especially when we got down to that big final of the day when you get the two big guns slugging out. You've got effectively two GBs, really, haven't you? You've got a GB offense versus a GB defense. The GB offense was a little bit lesser. There's injury or absence, I don't know. But then a very, very strong GB defense, who I think that was the edge. I think that's what it was. It was the irresistible force against the immovable object. And I think at the end of the day, the immovable object stood its ground. Certainly, that's how it panned out.
We certainly had to. We certainly watching it, and obviously the third and fourth place playoff was first up, and we had the lightning delay in the middle of that, and there was a funny part where Youngie called the game to the Cardiff Hurricanes because they were like 14 points up. There was two minutes left, and then next minute Titans have tied the game because inexplicably Cardiff Hurricanes, instead of running out the clock, threw a bomb into the end zone.
Yep. Yeah.
Honestly,
Who knows?
I know we've still got some stuff to cover before we get there, but anyone
No, but
who
let's
knew
go
what
here.
was going on.
Let's go here,
Go
because
there.
yeah. We were half the Centurions. We were all watching that, obviously, at home and getting ready for the next day. And the chat just exploded. Everyone's like, "Wait, what? Do I not understand the rules of this game? Is there something that you're not like doing this? Is it, hey, is there something wrong with winning a game here? Do you not just run the clock down? Nah, why not? Let's just roll the dice." You can just imagine. I couldn't see his face, but I imagine Alan Mead of the Titans, the old veteran he is, the old wise fox he is. I bet he was rubbing his hands thinking, "I'm coming on
Christmas
points. I'm going to miss this opportunity." And wow, because Youngie called it. Youngie was like, I think his exact words were, "You might as well go and get a brew because this game's over," or something like that. Words to those effects.
That's probably exactly it. Yeah, absolutely.
And Youngie, 9 times out of 10 is right, so wow.
It should have been, right? So for anyone who hasn't seen this, right, let's just walk this through. So we were playing Cardiff 14 points ahead. We have a lightning delay. The game comes back. Okay, they're 14 points ahead. On the commentary, obviously, Alan says, "Oh, this game's over." Titans really weren't
in
playing
possession as well.
Yeah.
Cardiff were in possession as well, to your point.
Yeah, so then suddenly Manchester mount this comeback and get within a touchdown, but then Cardiff have the ball and they're in the Manchester half, I think they'd got the first down. And basically because they'd achieved the first, they achieved the first down and then they had 4 downs that they could have kneeled to kneel the timeout, right?
Yeah.
Because the first down stops the clock, but then you've got 4 more. Manchester were out of timeouts at this point. So, I think Young even said on the commentary, and Cardiff will just kneel the game now. And then they didn't. And we're all like, what are they doing? And not only did they just run around.
The Sandra Bullock inside me was screaming. I was like that. You remember Blindside? Just run the dang ball. I'm just like that. Just do something really simple. Just take the ball at the backfield, run about, let somebody chase you. Just burn the clock down. Just mess about. Kneel. Do you know what I mean? It was like, nah. Do you know what? Actually, we're just going to hit that big old self-destruct button. Boom. Let's go. Do you know what I mean? And Alan Mead, the Titans were all over that like a rash. Thank you very much.
I know. And then you think literally. They could have just straight kneeled. They didn't even have to run around in the backfield. But if you're going to run a play, just run the ball, right?
Yeah.
As long as a fumble and flag, for anyone who doesn't know, isn't a thing. So if something catastrophic happens, you'll still get the ball back. You've wasted some time. But they threw this bomb into the end zone. Manchester pick it and run it back all the way just about to a touchdown. I want to say they were inside the no run. I think it was less than 5 yards they were from the touchdown. So, and then they come on, and Alan Mead comes on,
Alan Mead,
yeah, who hasn't hardly played all. He just comes in, as I've noted, for these short down plays. It's obviously his kind of niche, and just chucks it in the end zone. And the next thing, on top of a lightning delay, everything's super late. Suddenly we've got overtime from nowhere,
Right. Alan Mead kept me on a bench. He kept me on a bench for 5 years. Okay, I was his backup quarterback at the Titans in contact, right? And in one of those years, because of the way it's split, Merseyside went on up a division. We went down, and we ended up in Division 2 remarkably. I don't know how that happened. So Alan Mead just went on and put up, I think it was the highest scoring offensive record any team's ever had, but it was absurd. I mean, it was just ridiculous. Yeah, every single game went mercy clock. Alan Mead just touched the time. If there's any quarterback, and Alan, we're all friends, and I'm the first to criticise you over everything, but if there's any quarterback at all in this game that you do not give that ball to under any circumstances with a bit of pressure, it's Alan Mead. And guess what? Boom, we've suddenly got Alan Mead on for short plays and extra points, thinking this was over, and you've given this old dog a chance to win it. And you don't do that. You just don't do that. You don't do that.
And they were a thorn in the backside of Cardiff the whole game. You're right. In the semi-finals, they gave the Hornets a big scare. And bar a couple of bar a couple of plays going their way and maybe a call potentially going their way, then it could have been slightly different. But they found themselves there and they didn't give up the whole time. And I think they were probably, maybe bar the Cheltenham Neptunes in terms of their performances. Obviously, they didn't get to where they needed to be, but they were probably the surprise of the day. And the Manchester Titans and ran Cardiff Hurricanes really close. And then to give, to your point, to then give Alan Mead 2-point conversion opportunities in overtime because they decided to scrap the first phase of overtime. You're running a tightrope at that point, aren't you? So
he's a smart quarterback. If you ever take a chance, take a look at his wrist coach. Okay? If you ever get a chance, Alan Mead's wrist coach, right, is a work of art. So it's got different colours. You know what you do when you got these things like, you know, Playways or whatever, you know, Playmaker X, when you kind of have your plays and it gives different colours. He has the first read, second read, third read in different colours. So as he glances at it, he knows his first read on every single play and every second, every single. This guy is meticulous. Okay, if that's any indication of Alan in every aspect of his life, he's meticulous. And if you give him that shot, it's something he's well drilled and well rehearsed and has been doing for an awful long time. Alan's the same age as me, so he is like, we've been around this game since the late 80s, early 90s. You just don't do that because he's going to go, thanks, you've let me back into the game. You let the old devil back into the game. And you know what happens when that happens? Goodbye. Yeah, so sorry, Alan, that's gratuitous, and I will offend you, I'm sure, in some other way shortly. But for today, I'm just going to be nice about you. You know? Yeah.
I was just going to say the thing for me, and I know we feel like we've probably talked about the Manchester Titans quite a lot, and we will come on to the others, you know, when we talk about the final. But I also think the one game for me that was a 50-50 call on who was going to win was always going to be their close game was the Manchester Titans and the Reading Devils. And we saw, and a lot of people said, if anybody's going to upset this apple cart of the Glasgow Hornets London Smoke final that we all thought we were on for from the start of the day, it was whoever came out of that game. And a lot of people, I think, were thinking that Reading would have won that game because they came in, they'd had a great season. And like, you know, I know from speaking to Alan Young, you know, I think I spoke to him before the semi-finals and said, you know, have you seen any surprises? And he said that was the one for him that he was like, you know, if Reading had gone through, they could have potentially upset the apple cart. But to Manchester's credit, they beat Reading, and then, as we said, they gave Glasgow a massive scare, proved that they deserved to be there, and then obviously also gave Cardiff an almost upset in that last game as well. So, you know, for me, if we look across these fixtures, that Manchester Reading game was the kind of tipping point for me, I think, because, you know, either of those teams had gone through, but I thought most people kind of thought maybe that Reading would go through and be the ones to kind of throw the spanner in the works. But Manchester have stood up and said, nope, we're better and we can throw a spanner in the works as well. So, you know, credit to Manchester on that.
And to that point, that's why the Devils deserve to win the plate, because they won arguably the game of the day. They lost in the game of the day, so they deserved that run through at the end. They deserve to go home with something because, and this is not taking away anything whatsoever from Glasgow or London. We can talk about that till the cows come home, but that's what everyone expects. You can listen to a million podcasts where we can break that down. But let's dig through all this and say, actually, as a real football fan, what was a real game to watch? That's a tasty game. That's a tasty game. 100%. Well done. Well done, Reading.
It was really good.
You picked yourself up and you went on a run and you came home with some silverware. You deserved it.
And you know, Reading Devils, just to put a pin on that point, they finished 13-3 in the regular season, where they have to play the London Smoke twice a year and the Cardiff Hurricanes in the cross conference. So, you know, that they were a good side and they were fifth seed going in. They were always going to be a challenge for somebody, and that's why they ended up winning the plate, I'm sure, because they're great side, and they showed it, coming up just short against the Titans. Should we go into the final then?
I thought you were going to say for a second there, great expectations, and that would have been a very, very highbrow pun, but, you know, let's leave.
Let's not. Kiwi, where do you want to go?
I know, I'm okay. I just wanted to mention, we talked about the Titans giving Glasgow a scare. I don't think we could ignore Cardiff probably freaking out London Smoke in that semi-final as well, right? Both of those semi-finals, super close and way closer than anybody thought they were going to be. So just for anyone who doesn't know, the London Smoke Cardiff game in the other semi-final was 26-24. Now, in a game of flag, that is a 2-point conversion. That is one play difference between London winning and it going to a draw or, going the other way. So, all of those teams, those 4 semi-final teams, were the 4 teams that proved that they deserved to be there. They were the best teams.
100%.
And, Cardiff, not a country mile away, in the final last year, all of that stuff. So again, let's not, we've talked about Manchester. I think, to be fair, we should give Cardiff some. We've kind of not slated, wrong word. We've maybe picked apart their performance in the 3rd, 4th playoff. But again, they were picking themselves up from coming off a 2-point loss to the London Smoke. To be that close to someone.
Yeah, you're so right.
We haven't mentioned that they beat the Manchester Titans by 1 point, having been well ahead without Joe Cotterill playing. Joe Cotterill did not suit up for this game either. He's currently in Paris throwing touchdowns in the European Championships, and he didn't play in that game. The Cardiff Hurricanes played amazingly all day, and they, apart from that one decision, they were really, really good. And there was a point where both semi-finals were happening on pitches 5 and 6 or 4 and 5. I was stood in the middle, about to go up and commentate on all 4 of these games, and I didn't know who I was going to be commentating on in each game, because Glasgow Hornets Manchester Titans started after the London Smoke Cardiff Hurricanes, and the Smoke Hurricanes went down to the final 2 or 3 plays, I think it was, where the London Smoke had to shut out at the end of it. And then we had that trepidatious game happening between the Hornets and the Titans. It was an unbelievable end to the game, let alone the fact that this tea party that Alan called, Youngie called on the call for the 3rd and 4th didn't end up that way. It was an incredible final 3 games, and we haven't even talked about the final yet. It's awesome.
Yeah. Right. We're on our mission tonight to try to condense the time to try to press this show. But then things like this happen. Kiwi's point's great, 2 points in it. The other game, 5 points in it, less than a score. Between the 2 semi-final games, 7 points across both games, separated finalists from people who were heartbroken. My goodness, that's how you want a season to end. That's how you want a season to end.
Totally agree. Yeah. So, can we go on to the final then? Let's get on to the final, because I had a lot of fun doing the play-by-play. My first ever time doing play-by-play. Hopefully, I did an all right job doing that. But I've got to say, thinking back on it and in the moment, I never felt that Glasgow Hornets weren't in control. They felt impervious the whole time. When you've got McAnally, Valent, and Dyer in the backfield, you're going to have a swarming, blanketing defense to come up against. And the London Smoke have got some incredible athletes, and let alone the GB starting quarterback. They have a lightning fast and agile offense, and it never felt for 1 minute that they weren't being smothered by that Glasgow Hornets defense. Especially, is it Lightbody, who's their blitzer, their rusher, rushing. He's like 6'4", rushing right in front of any QB. It's unbelievable what they're able to do. Did you feel the same, Kiwi, during that final, that it just didn't feel like they were out of control the whole time?
No, I think they came in disciplined. They knew what the game plan was. They knew what they wanted to do. But let's not forget that, these players are playing, you're talking about GB players playing each other all the time. The Glasgow guys, they know Charlie. They know what he wants to do. Some interesting piece of commentary from Alan Young on that was, I maybe shouldn't say this in case there's any Euros teams interested in listening, but, Charlie's favourite first play is 3 hitches and a fly. And Glasgow knew that, and they covered that from the start. Like, straight out of the gates, they knew what was going to happen. And that just shows that, several things is maybe Glasgow in that game against Manchester hadn't done as much scout against Manchester because they didn't think that was going to happen, which is where Manchester came up maybe and gave them a bit of a shock, and they had to kind of regroup because they hadn't expected that. I think what we saw in this Glasgow-London game was that Glasgow had done their homework. They know how Smoke play. They know from, even from GB, right? These teams know each other. Most of these top players know each other inside out. They're playing on the same team at GB. We said about Glasgow having a GB defense versus a GB offense. They've been doing this for, week in, week out, for years, right? A lot of these guys. So I think that's what we saw. Glasgow were clinical. They had a game plan. They stuck to it. And if anything, they've just frustrated the Smoke, I think. Because the Smoke just started, like you say, smothered them. And then they started to struggle. And they almost, I thought, didn't have maybe the depth of playbook that we would expect. And I know that's hard to say when we're talking about a GB caliber quarterback. But, they just, you're right, Andy, felt like they maybe just didn't have the answers for the fact that Glasgow were just on them from the start. And almost like they were reading the play calls from the sideline, if I'm honest. That's kind of what it felt like.
My favorite defender. I'm going to say this because this is my favorite defender in the entire British game. David McAnally plays for Glasgow. He is now. We band around the word elite a lot. Okay, as soon as people get to a certain level, they just start calling themselves elite, and you're like, well, elite to me is something. When you say that, you should really mean that. It's an international term. It's not because you're the best in your country. You're elite. No, you're not elite. You're just the best in your country. But there are very few players who fall into that. That guy falls into it. First time I think I met him was 2013 or 2014. He was down in Manchester. Him and Julie were down there. They lived in there for a little brief while. They joined in the Titans. This guy stepped in and played a bit of cornerback, and you could instantaneously see that this guy was just... This is contact, by the way. This guy was just way better than everyone else around him. His reading of the game, his understanding of the game, the way he moves, his hips, his first step, everything is just ridiculous. So I don't know. I wasn't at that game, but I would believe in my heart of hearts, even if you told me otherwise, that he may have been a decisive factor in that ultimate balance was the defense against the offense. That's really what it came down to.
We said that on the stream. No, he didn't. Jules did. He could have
thrown away from him. I mean, like the amount of when you put a guy like that in your defense, a good quarterback is going to say, "I'm not throwing it anywhere within your postcode." Because you're getting that man. Yeah. I've seen Macca play an offense too, and believe me, he gets that ball in his hand, he's got house. Yeah, I mean that's just only one way.
Funny, you know I mean? I think it was Younger. You had the final say on who got MVP. He gave it to Julian Holborn-White, who caught everything. I'm telling you, that man has hands of steel. He doesn't drop a pass, and
blue hands.
Unbelievable. And he and it was funny because then Macca shouted out, DBs are people too, because he's dead right,
yeah.
And I don't mean this because he wasn't trying. I meant he just so cool. It didn't look like he broke a sweat all day, because it just looked like he was there. He was able to chat to the sideline. He was just so cool all day. And I realized that halfway through that I forgot an important name to not mention in that backfield, and that's obviously Callum Stepani as well, who is another GBDB. And so it was a tough sledding for London Smoke. Now,
Macca is always going to reach further. He's always going to reach further, though, in my opinion, than anybody else. And I'm just going to be biased, super duper biased. If you give me my wish list and you said build any contact team you want or any flag team you want, who's the first player you're going to pick overall in the whole of the UK? That's my guy. That is my guy. Everything. But sorry, that's just my.
And I can totally understand why, because 100%. He was incredible. And that battle that we had with Jam Chan as well, it was basically McAnally versus him that whole game, and it was just incredible to see just how quick Jam can get off the line, how quick he can get himself open, and it only requires Charlie to have him as a first read, and it was there. And I felt at one point that it was certainly towards the end of the second half that was what the Smoke were going to do. They were going to do chunk by chunk, They weren't going to take the big plays. They were going to do 7 yards at a time and get over the line. But there was just a couple of drives where it just didn't click, and that swarming defense just kept them out. And in the end, what was effectively a flawless performance from Nicky Farrell as well at quarterback, with some of those 2 QB sort of looks that we've talked about before. It was a really impressive display.
Yeah, and no disrespect to the other players. I mean, really, honestly, no disrespect. They're a great team. Very briefly, in 2018, I was in Glasgow, relocated for a year. It was the year that I got together with my beautiful wife, and blah, 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 and the rest is history. And I trained with those guys for 6 months. I went out to the East End of Glasgow to Crown Point. We were training at the time, and my jaw hit the ground. I mean, like, Youngie and those guys, it's a different class. Now, I've never been to London training, so I can't speak for that, but I have been to Manchester Titans a lot, and I've seen these guys a lot, and there's a method to what they do, which is really, really meticulous. It's really excellent, so you can't. I mean, we had a great final, great teams in there, but Hornets, deservedly, they work their socks off. This program never stops, and it doesn't stop. We're going to talk about at the end of the show a little bit about some stuff north of the border, and a couple of announcements there that are interesting. But fair play. They worked for that, man. They worked for it.
They really did. Awesome stuff, and congratulations to the Glasgow Hornets in the end, who ended up being national champions. Final say?
Back to back. I think we should just acknowledge, obviously, So, big shout out to them for doing that.
2026 three-peat. Is it possible?
We'll see.
Yeah, if they keep the players together, you wouldn't put it past them.